Okay, this is episode number 5 of a 5-part homily on the Trinity of God. Thank you for joining me in this. If this is the first one of the series you've seen, should be self-contained, but you may want to go back and watch the previous 4. But you will notice that there's things that I've repeated and things I've actually disagreed with myself because this whole process of putting this together for me has been kind of a dynamic exploration in what it is that I believe and how it is that I will talk about what I believe. So I want you to know that by the time you've watched this, I probably will have changed my mind and I believe different things. So I'm presuming about you as my audience that you are someone who has an interest in the way you relate to God. Most people have some sense of God. Some people don't care a whit about God, but you're probably someone who knows that your relationship with God is crucial to the quality of your life and to the well-being of the whole human community because the choices you make matter. So it's a value to all the other humans on the planet that you figure out what it is that you believe. So you understand that the importance of being intentional about how you create your understanding about your relationship with God, that matters. So as for how your observation of this series will impact you, I want to be very clear that I don't expect that you're going to agree with me. I'm going to get rid of this stuff here. In fact, I don't want you to agree with me. I want you to be figuring out what it is that's important to you. You have to craft your own relationship with the ultimate. That's what really matters here. So this is your work to do. Nevertheless, I do hope that this expression of what I find helpful to me gives you the permission and the inspiration to explore your own understanding of God. And I want to say that my development of this has been framed around what I understand to be necessarily true about the nature of God from 3 different perspectives. It has to be true from all 3 perspectives. One is it has to be something that's affirmed as a part of religious tradition. Now, I happen to be a Protestant Christian of the West from the Free Church tradition in my upbringing, but I hope to bring many other religious perspectives to bear on this question about how do we understand the nature of God. I was raised in a fundamentally scientific household. My bachelor's degree is in physical science. So I am sort of my core, I am a scientist. And later in life, I've become much more philosophical. So religion and science and philosophy are things that are informing for me my understanding of the nature of God. And I am very reluctant to believe anything about God that is disputed by any one of those 3 truth claims. For example, one of the things a lot of people believe about God is that God knows what the future is going to be. Well, scientifically speaking, the future doesn't exist yet. The future exists in potentiality. There's lots of things that might become true in the future. But the arrow of time is such that it only moves in one direction. So if we want to believe in a God that already knows what's going to happen, we have to think of that God as somehow a God that exists outside of the created order. And that raises all kinds of other problems. So that doesn't work for me. For me, God has to be something that is a part of the creation. So if you want God, if you're a theist and God is on the outside telling us and controlling things, then you're probably not going to agree with me, right? So, given these constraints, if science says that someone's assertion can't be true, then I'm going to reject it. But I am the sole arbiter of what truth means for me. This is my faith to construct. And I also hold that this is true for everyone, that it's your truth to construct, that you don't have to believe anything about what it is that I'm saying, but you each have to believe, you have to decide the truth of what you believe, okay? You're charged with your task. Your task is to create your relationship with the ultimate. You're entirely free to decide that if you have no use for God, that's fine, right? But I strongly urge you to not passively accept somebody else's conclusions. Figure out what's true for you. So I hope that you're listening to what it is that I have to say through a kind of screen of skepticism. And I offer this with the prayer that it may be of aid to you as you seek your truth. All right. So with that said, here are my perspectives on the nature of God. We all decide for ourselves, whatever is a relationship with capital G God, we all decide what's important, what has worth, what am I going to pay attention to, what am I going to put my efforts towards. And these are sort of nodes or attractors that may be understood in the manner of our ancestors as gods. These are the things that have worth. And so what we worship, what we give worth to, those are our gods, whether we call them that or not. Now, many of us decide that we want to have a relationship with the ultimate, that is, the ultimate is somehow held for us as a person, a personage, and we call this person God. The doctrine of the Trinity asserts that God is best understood to be three persons in one. One of the things that arises for us out of this formula is that we can better experience the dynamic nature of God as we understand God to be arising from the interaction of these three persons, which, classically speaking, we refer to, at least within Christianity, as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, or Holy Spirit. And the advantage of these three titles is that they are references to God that we can find in the Bible. When we conceptualize God as three in one, there's some really wonderful insights that become available to us. And I suggest to you, and I would include in the notes for this, a reference to the work of Cynthia Bourgeault in her book, Holy Trinity and the Law of Three, which gives some grounding in this whole understanding that it's not just about our relationship with God, it's about our understanding of God as relationship itself. So, the three persons in the Trinity of my understanding, at least as I'm laying it out here, are Creator God, Mind of God, and Love of God. And each of these signifies a particular aspect of how it is that we can encounter the divine. So, week 2, we talked about the concept of Creator God, and that the creation happens because of a series of forces that we can say are characteristic of the nature of being, but the nature of being gives rise to the material world that we experience. And so reality as a material experience arises out of the processes of emanation. Things just sort of appear. They drip out. It's not that something happened all at once. Bit by bit, creation happens. Through a process of emergence, when you have the right things together, there's something new that arises in the interplay of these three things. And that together these are characterized by a larger process we call evolution. And evolution is continuing and will continue, as nearly as we can tell, throughout as long as the universe exists. Evolution will continue, and that it has a direction, it has purpose. It is moving towards greater complexity, and it seems to be bent on creating the occasion for greater and greater consciousness. So that's what Creator God is about. It is important to recognize when we're talking about the creation is that we are a part of the creation. So we are created, and we are also the creators of the Creator God as we conceptualize who it is that God is. So as sentient beings, we are both the result of the processes and the agents by which the process continues its expression. So this aspect of the divine coming into the world of form and history is essentially what John, in the very beginning of the Gospel of John, talks about. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word in its original form there is logos, which is a Greek word for word, for form, for description, but it was also very much a part of a Greek philosophy for the origins of being. So in the beginning was this understanding, the mind. There was something that was understood to be true, which brought forth the incarnation. So the person of Jesus, of the Son, is the incarnation, that is God coming into the world in some kind of form. In the beginning was the Logos, the Word, the Son. So the second aspect of God is mind of God. And mind of God signifies a phenomenon that arises out of any complex adaptive system, which an example of which is all of humanity, right? Any system can manifest, can exhibit mind-like qualities when it has certain properties, right? So the properties that are necessary for mind to arise, and we talked about this in terms of slime mold and ants and starlings in a murmuration, or in the players on a soccer team on the pitch, right? That the first thing that is necessary for this complex adaptive system to form the qualities of mind is that they have to have some sense of the common good. All of these elements are somehow working together to create something that will be of benefit to all of them. And this common good, as it is understood, is something that creates the well-being of all the elements within the system. So that the system creates the well-being of the elements, and the elements create the greater good in the whole system. And the third piece here is that all of the elements need to be able to communicate with each other in order to do this. So when you maximize the communication between the elements and creating a common sense of purpose, and a part of that sense of purpose is the well-being of all of the elements within the system, what arises is this quality of mind. All right, the third property here is a love of God. The love of God signifies the force of attraction that we witness in different ways and in different kinds of relationships, but which always move the individual parts of any system into a more connected and coordinated stance with regard to others in any kind of given system. So love thus becomes apparent when the individuals within the system, like humans within a family, for example, they are in a sense present to each other. So we're aware of those others in the system with the awareness that we are in some sense a part of something that makes us inseparable. It is that inseparability of our individuality in a relationship in which we are present to each other that creates this phenomenon that we call love. And when we're talking about this in the wholeness of all of creation, this becomes the love of God. So these three persons, Creator God, mind of God, love of God, we can see them as distinct things, but you can hear as I'm talking about them, they kind of fold into each other, they relate to each other, they empower each other. They are not separate, but they are individual in their inseparability. And as such, they are an example of a strange kind of, they have a kind of startling feature, which is that they are all examples of a strange loop. Now, most folks don't know what a strange loop is. Douglas Hofstadter wrote a book back in the mid-'80s called Gödel, Escher, Bach, in which he introduced the idea of a strange loop. And when people really didn't get it, he came around 20 years later and wrote another book called I Am a Strange Loop. So basically what a strange loop is the observation that anything that is arising at multiple levels at the same time. And those levels, even though the higher levels are more complex, they are in some sense created by the lower levels, but they also create the levels under them. So Kurt Gödel, as a mathematician, created a really elegant proof, which was something that became true at multiple levels. M.C. Escher, you've seen his prints, and where he's got the print of the hands drawing the hand. Which hand is drawing which, so there's a sort of like, where's this beginning and where does it end, which the fugues of Johann Sebastian Bach will continue to rise until they get to the place that they started. And so Hofstadter described this as a strange loop, but it's actually, once you really understand what a strange loop is, you recognize it's actually not so strange. To some degree, everything is a strange loop. It's like, take this actual this video that you're watching right now. You are watching the end point of a process that began with me sitting at my computer and touching a key which caused a letter to appear on my screen, and then another letter, and that became a word, and then a sentence and a paragraph, as I'm lining out what it is that I intend to tell you. And now I'm looking at the screen, I'm reading off the screen, and so I'm sharing the words that I've created, which have ideas, which I'm communicating to you, such that my mind can tell you what's going on in it, such that you might make up your mind to have a kind of parallel response. And so, do the letters, do the keystrokes create the idea, or does the idea dictate the keystrokes? And of course, both are true. So when I initially read Hofstadter, I couldn't understand what he was talking about. But now that I get it, it's sort of like one of those things where once you see it, it's like, oh, yeah, it's everywhere. I am a strange loop. Okay, so I want to close this by giving you an example of a strange loop. And this is something I've already introduced earlier, but I want to go back and talk about it in a bit more depth. And this is my experience back in the mid-'80s when I was at the Laguna Seca racetrack in California, at a place somewhat between Salinas and Monterey, in a kind of out parcel of the property there, where the Grateful Dead was producing a series of concerts, largely for the purpose of videoing what became their music video for what is their biggest hit, called "A Touch of Grey." And you can look on YouTube and you can see the video, you can see the music video. But what had happened there was that they created a stage in the middle of a field. And it was right near a campground, so the Deadheads came, and they came to this concert. And at night, the video team was producing the video. So the day, it's sort of like during the day they had a concert. They had Ry Cooder and Bruce Hornsby, and then the Grateful Dead playing. And when the sun went down, or as the sun went down, when it got to be dusk, people would go back to the campground, and the video team would start setting up on stage. And I was privileged to be there because a buddy of mine was working then as the road manager for the Grateful Dead. And so I was hanging out with him, and I had this all-access pass, so I could go anywhere I wanted. But I hadn't really been out to where the audience was, which is just this big open field. So it was late in the day, and I walked out, and I wanted to just kind of get a look at things. So I went up high, I could find the highest mound I could get on. I climbed up on top of that place so I could look down. And down below me, I could see a group of a couple of dozen Deadheads that were milling about in a dance, and they were now, if you're a Deadhead, you realize that rhythm is from Not Fade Away. So they were clapping, they were stomping, they were dancing in this sort of mass of a couple of dozen, maybe 3 dozen people who were in this dust and the dusk and celebrating, dancing. And as I said before, I kind of looked at that and I thought, well, who's in charge of this? And, nobody's in charge of Deadheads, right? This is an organism that has arisen out of the individual actions of each of these people who've chosen to be a part of this celebration, this kind of worship experience for them as they are clapping and dancing and sharing this moment with each other and creating this thing, which is the dance. And the dance itself is a dynamic thing. It keeps changing. It's undulating. Different moves. Somebody starts one thing and somebody else copies it, and it's sort of, they catch on, and then somebody else does something. And so they were doing it when I got there, and they were doing it when I left. I mean, they were just continuing this process over and over again. And so the question arises when we're looking at the concept of a strange loop. Did the people create the dance? Or did the dance make the people into dancers? Which created which? And of course, both. This is a strange loop. This is the lower order creates the higher order creates the lower order, and so it's self-created, which is how reality is. It's how humanity is. And it is how we as humans, if we choose to, construct a relationship with the ultimate by giving it a personality, giving it personhood, or in the case of the Trinity, 3 persons in one. We begin to see the world and experience the world as we are part of the world. So, thank you for watching this, and I hope that you may, by the choices that you make, create the world that you want us all to live in. And may you, by your alignment with the mind of God, put on that mind and thus see the strange loop that is the beauty of this life. And may you, by your full expression of your unique self and your appreciation of the full diversity of all of the human experience, held with the awareness that we're all bound together in a seamless web of common purpose, that you may know and be the love of God. Amen.